hot. How do you open this thing? But they have like some really...
Hello survivors and welcome to Survivor's Guild, the only channel that determines your odds of surviving 2006's stoner comedy horror movie Evil Bong. So stay tuned till the end for your survival stats. I'm your sharp-dressed slasher turned straight edge, GhostFake. Now I hope you like thinking you're a whole lot funnier than you actually are, cause this movie is getting spoiled. Evil Bong, directed by Charles Band and written by Charles Band and Dominic Muir, and starring David Weidoff, John Patrick Jordan, Mitch Eakins, Brian Lloyd, Robin Sidney, Kristyn Green, Michelle Mais, Sonny Carl Davis, and Tommy Chong. Evil Bong is about a group of stoners and their escapade trying to survive an evil piece of paraphernalia. I'm covering this series in part because it's ridiculous, part because the movies get shorter and shorter, and part because I'm curious how YouTube is going to handle content that revolves around drugs but is largely non-violent. We know YouTube hates violence, well, some types of violence, but I'm curious if they will hit videos with the same types of restrictions based on something that was illegal for a long time, but now is growing to be more and more acceptable here in America. And although I'm not a partaker of the ganja myself, I have a good time with these movies and appreciate the work that Charles Band and the entirety of Full Moon Features puts into them. By and large, they are throwaway movies, but well worth the price of admission for the Full Moon streaming service, which is not sponsoring this video, but you should sign up for anyway, as they usually have a deal where if you sign up for $50 a year, or whatever it costs, you either get the Blu-ray set for the Puppet Master franchise or a bunch of their DVDs and Blu-rays depending on what deal they're having. And although it's no Shudder, it's a decent little streaming platform and well worth the small cost. And if you do sign up, tell them GhostFake sent you, and they'll be like, who the f is that? We open up to Alistair knocking on the door, next to a second commandment violation, not because of the joint, but because of the image, at an apartment with a room for rent, where we get introduced to Larnell, a conspiracy theorist and stoner, who checks the straight-laced Alistair for a wire before Alistair tells him that he's there for the room, not to narc.
Oh, I can assure you I am not a narcotics officer. I'm here to answer your ad.
And he then gives Alistair a tour of the place and introduces him to his roommates, Bachman, the perma-stoner.
Call me Bachman, man. Like the Roman god of party, and I'm always down for a good bash.
And Brett, the athlete that got cut from the team for being a stoner.
First, you might want to hit the gym, do a few curls, rock the crunches.
Before Alistair finds out that the room he is renting is not exactly the room he thought he was getting.
This is your own room. Room is in space. This is your space, all your space.
But at least Larnell sets up his bed for him. Well, for $5 extra. And we find out that Alistair, who has no objections to them smoking the Mary Jane, chooses not to partake and wants to focus solely on his studies as he pursues his master's in chemistry and a bachelor's in metaphysics. Larnell then tells the group that he's finally saved up enough money to purchase a large bong that's been for sale in the classifieds in one of his magazines.
Large bong for sale. Originally purchased in the 1960s in New Orleans.
In an ad that says that the recently deceased owner claimed that it was possessed. Recently deceased owner? That sounds like a meat bank deposit. Oh, I guess never mind.
Because if there's one thing this pad is lacking, it's a killer bong, man.
Cut to some days later when Larnell is playing Mario and Al is studying, and Rabbit, the delivery driver, shows up and drops off a package. Rabbit leaves after retrieving the postage due, and runs into Brett as he returns to the pad. We learn from Brett that Larnell comes from money, and that his grandfather, Cyril, was a bigwig lawyer that was permanently confined to a wheelchair when he was hit by a bus, and that he used to send Larnell an allowance, but stopped when Larnell dropped out of law school. The group marvel at the size of the bong he bought.
It's huge.
Look at the beauty, bro. Look at the beauty.
Before they decide to fire it up and take it for a spin. Now, I'll admit, I could be wrong, but isn't this a hookah? Let me know in the comments below. And after a brief discussion about how there is no such thing as a bad high, wherein Brett disagrees, Larnell wants to take another hit, but Bachman is fresh out of green. And later, while everyone naps, the bong begins glowing/whispering. And Al witnesses it before it stops. Cut to 24 hours later when Bachman has come into more green and Brett brings over Luann and Janet and introduces them to the guys. We learn that Larnell and Luann don't get along before Luann jacks a bunch of Bachman's weed while Janet and Alistair hit things off. Brett, Luann, and Janet then leave to go to a party, and later while Bachman naps, the bong absorbs his spirit and transports him to the bong world, which is basically a seedy strip club filled with full moon characters and strippers that have carnivorous boobs. Oh no, those are the worst kind! And when Bachman commits to making out with this stripper, her beastly boobs attack him and deposit him in the meat bank at deposit number 1. The next morning, Brett arrives back at the apartment, and he and Alistair have a chat about living life to the fullest, before Brett tells everyone to wake up so that they can clean, as the girls will be coming over later to party.
Get up.
What's up, bro? Is someone here? Do I gotta flush the stuff down the crapper?
Relax.
But when he is unable to wake up Bachman, and Larnell notices that his bong looks different, Alistair attempts to wake up Bachman, but realizes that he is no longer of the living, and he tries calling the authorities, but Brett hangs up the phone as he doesn't want the police to see the drugs they have. Brett believes that they should hide the body somewhere, as he believes that Bachman wouldn't want them to get in trouble for his death, and Larnell agrees. Just then, they hear a knock on the door, and it turns out to be Larnell's grandpa Cyril.
Maybe he'll go away.
Larnell! I can hear you in there, you fool!
They quickly hide Bachman's body under a load of dirty laundry and let Cyril in. He comes in and insults them for a while before dropping the news that he recently got remarried, and Larnell makes it awkward.
You know, I was hoping you'd hook up with some big bimbo that I could bang on the side.
Before Cyril introduces them to Rosemary. Later, after Cyril and Rosemary have left, Larnell wants to get high, but Al postulates that maybe Bachman died because the weed was bad, but everyone else smoked it and no one else died, which reminds Brett that the girls are coming over soon and they still need to clean. And he suggests that maybe they hide Bachman's body downstairs until they can figure out a more permanent solution.
How about we store Bachman downstairs? Just for tonight, man, and we can have our little party.
A little later, after they have cleaned up the place, the bong begins talking to Larnell when no one else is around.
Feeling good, Larnell.
She can talk.
And convinces him to smoke up, before she absorbs his spirit as well, and transports him into the bong world, where he reunites with Bachman, and meets the Ginger Dead Man.
Pretty hot.
Before he too falls victim to a babe with a beastly bust, busting Larnell into the meat bank at deposit number 2. Brett shows up with the girls, and after they get bored playing a trivia game, Brett, Luann, and Janet decide to toke a little bit, and we find out that Luann is a hyperactive, Brett is a relaxed stoner, and they both end up passing out, and that getting stoned puts Janet in the mood. But Al can't get in the mood when he notices that Larnell is still asleep. He goes over and checks his pulse and realizes that he is also no longer of the living.
He's dead.
And he also notices that the bong has changed again. And then they witness the bong absorb Luann and Brett's life force into the bong world. Cut over to bong world when Brett and Luann enter the strip club, and Luann immediately starts messing with the sound system before she gets jump scared by a demonic toy, and then bounced out of the club entirely. Brett then gets approached by one of the strippers, taking the form of a girl he used to know, who then uses her carnivorous cleavage to maul him into the meat bank at deposit number 3. Meanwhile, back in the real world, the bong has changed once again, and it also begins speaking to them.
He only took one hit.
Baby, that's all it takes.
Telling them that the more they toke, the more it takes. And then Janet passes out. Just then, a man walks in the door. Not the hero we deserve, but the one that we needed. His name is Jimbo, and he was the previous owner of the bong. Al brings up that the ad said that the owner was deceased.
Well, that's my wife, man. Wishful thinking on her part.
Well, that clears up that lack of deposit. He explains that the bong is evil and that his wife sold all of his stuff that he had in storage, including the bong and his Hot Wheels.
My Hot Wheels collection? Man, I miss those little cars.
How do we stop it?
And he explains that it killed all of his friends, which is something that we'll consider shortly, because he explains that he was also trapped in the bong, but was able to free himself, giving Al hope that he'll be able to free Janet and his friends. They determine that Al's only hope is to use the bong to get high himself, so that he can enter Bong World and destroy the bong and get his friends out. Jimbo then gives him some mystery pills, and Al smokes from the bong and passes out. He enters Bong World, and the bong comes to life and talks to Jimbo.
Jimbo, baby, long time no see.
Pressuring him to smoke up as well. But Jimbo just says no to drugs and then tells EB that he came to take her out. Meanwhile, in Bong World, Al makes his presence known to EB and tells her that he's there to save Janet. But EB begins throwing Bong World strippers at him to tempt him to stay. While Chong, I mean Jimbo, attempts to destroy the bong, first with a hammer and then with a chainsaw. Meanwhile, Alistair snaps out of it and heads over to Janet to snap her out of it.
Cease and desist your offensive gyrations immediately.
Back in the real world, Jimbo realizes what he must do to destroy the bong. Blow this bong into pieces. This is his last resort. Explosion, no smoking. Don't give a damn if I die while I'm choking. But the bong then releases its most potent hits, which are super effective. Meanwhile, Alistair and Janet try to flee Bong World and run directly into a cameo of Bill Moseley, and EB explains her master plan to Alistair.
The more you toke from me, the more powerful I become.
Where she plans on taking over the world and stoning it, imagining a world of bong smoke clouds and bong water oceans. But Alistair is all about choice and calls EB a tyrant.
People should have the right to get high when they want, and if they want.
Before he slips Janet some of the pills that Jimbo gave him, and he takes them himself, sobering both of them up, while Jimbo impairs his way into the Bong world. Janet and Alistair sober their way all the way back to the real world, while Jimbo faces off against DB, revealing that he's strapped dynamite to himself, kamikazing himself into the meat bank at deposit number 4, while Al and Janet wake up in the real world, as does Larnell, Luann, and Brett. Bachman bursts through the door and reveals what his friends did with his body.
Dude, I just woke up in the basement underneath a pile of trash.
And I can only assume that Jimbo's body will have the same fate. Cut over to Bong World, which now belongs to Jimbo, who is filled with strippers and Hot Wheels.
Hot Wheels.
And the movie ends. Now let's take a look at our main characters and the death that surrounds them to determine your odds of surviving this movie. We start off our meat bank deposits with 0, zilch, nada, as these people, even though they die in Bong World, were able to come back to life, which means that there's hope for Jimbo and his friends, though I don't know why he'd leave, which means that you have a 100% chance of surviving this movie. Given those odds, how would you furnish Bong World as the new king? Let me know in the comments below. And if this is your first time on my channel, go ahead and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of my future videos. And a huge thanks to my patrons for their continued support. Alrighty guys, as always, thanks and don't die.